My name is Mike McClure. I guess now I am a consultant for zoos.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. So y'all, I am so stinking excited about this episode. I am bringing you the foremost Footcare dude in the world of elephants, Mike McClure. And he's just a really cool dude. I feel like we barely even scratch the surface in this interview. And you're going to hear Mike talk about what he does because, you know, that's what we do in the interview. But what you need to picture is that this interview happened after a whole day at Seneca Park Zoo, where we just were there. Well, I was there while he trained the elephant keepers at Seneca Park Zoo and also from Rosamond Gifford Zoo in Syracuse on elephant foot care techniques. And it's amazing to watch what they do. They have these big like nail file devices and these like cutters and stuff. And like the blades are really sharp. And he'll describe why they do all of this. It's absolutely fascinating. But watching it was crazy, just absolutely crazy. And as we'll talk about in the interview, he even had me come up at one point and like feel the changes that were being made to this incredible African elephant's foot. It was just astounding. And we talk a lot about work done at zoos. We talk about work done out in the field in Nepal and in Africa. There's so much, and it's so cool. Mike is a really cool guy. And actually, the story of how this interview came to be is also pretty fascinating. So I kind of want to share it with y'all. So if you're all caught up on the podcast, you've actually heard Mike McClure on here before, or at least a tale of him and a little bit of audio of him. Because when I went and played for Emily and with Emily the elephant at Buttonwood Park Zoo the second time, she was having a really big day because Mike was there. And that was when we first met. And he seemed like a really cool dude. I got to watch the very end of what he was doing with Emily's feet. And then he watched me drum with Emily. And then afterwards, he's the guy who called me up. We talked about this a little in the interview, but he called me up because he was explaining how elephant tongues work. And it's really fascinating. And they form this like ball, like almost like a fist with their tongues. It's really cool, y'all. And he just had me come up to Emily and like showed me with her tongue. And it was just so cool. And we talk about that more, but like, I had already had this mind-blowing experience, and then he just took it to the next level. And you could tell dude just like really understands these elephants, these animals. And so that happened, and I kind of vaguely was like, oh, that's a person I should keep in mind. And then, was doing stuff at Buttonwood, and my brain just didn't go there. So fast forward to months later, and Zoe was heading to Seneca Park Zoo to shadow their vet, Chris. And I kind of drove there in the afternoon to just kind of be there as well. And when Zoe finished up with Chris, we kind of met in the middle of the zoo. And it was Dr. Chris, who you've heard on here before, And David Hamilton, who is a listener of the podcast, and hi David, and was pretty excited to meet me, and we exchanged cards and got the ball rolling, and that's how we got that interview and probably more coming down the road. And then Mike McClure, who happened to be at Seneca Park Zoo that day doing the thing that he does. And so I met everybody and talked to everybody, and we all exchanged cards, and it was awesome. And Mike was super interested in doing the podcast, and we really hit it off. And I was like, hey, instead of doing this virtually, when are you coming back to Seneca Park Zoo? When you're in Rochester again, we can totally do the interview. And so that led to this incredible day where I got to hang out with elephants and the amazing elephant keeper teams of 2 different zoos and learn about all this stuff and then share it with y'all. So that was very cool. It was very special. And after the interview, our teams all went out and got dinner and just hung out. And it was just an amazing day. Very, very, very cool people. Mike and the elephant team at Seneca Park Zoo and the elephant team at Rosamond Gifford Zoo. Just fantastic stuff. So, yeah, I know I've rambled a bit, but this was a really exciting time, and I'm really excited to share this interview with y'all, and I wanted to give you the context for it. Real quick, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any interview episodes or any of my Friday Zoo News episodes. Follow along on the socials at Rossifari and on TikTok at Rossifari Pod, all that good stuff. So with that said, let's get to it. Here is my interview with Mike McClure. Oh, and I'm actually going to start kind of with his introduction again, because we just went from moment one. So you'll rehear that. But yeah, enjoy.
My name is Mike McClure. I guess now I am a consultant for zoos. Don't really like the word consultant.
You don't like any of the words. You were saying you don't like saying that you run a business either.
Yeah, I don't like labels.
That's fair.
It feels weird. I'm a zoo guy, right? I'm an animal guy. So I've spent my entire life at this point working with living things and trying to support living things and build teams around those. So it feels very strange to be in a, air quotes, business, right?
Sure.
And having to generate my own revenue to keep paying the bills and paying insurance and stuff through what I love so much.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
As Rossifari continues to grow and I look more at that stuff, yeah, it's weird to think about. I mean, and as you know, my day job, I'm a professional drummer, and it's the same thing. This fun little hobby that I grew up doing. And now I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I drum enough to pay the bills. It's very weird.
Yeah. Right. So I guess to better answer your question, in 2022, I stepped away from a zoo that I'd been at for 27 years and a formal career as, at the time, a general curator for a zoo, and started doing more of what you saw today, which is working with zoos, specifically with elephants, and doing Footcare programs, husbandry programs, team building. But I have expanded more into what I never thought I would do, which is focus on people. And I do a lot of culture change work, a lot of team building, a lot of conflict resolution stuff, and seem to be pretty good at it, and have found that that's a skill that zoos need and appreciate. So that's what I do now: animals, conservation projects, and people.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's, I'm sure since you hate labels, you're going to hate what I'm about to say, but you are basically the foremost elephant foot care specialist out there. And I've heard that from enough elephant people to know that. It's not like you're the one saying that.
Oh, but, yeah, I was already getting tense as you said that. I think that I do a lot of it, and I've been very fortunate to be associated with some remarkable people in my career, and have gotten opportunities to put my ideas out there. I'm the course administrator for AZA's Principles of Elephant Management, and I teach the foot care section. So I've had an opportunity to talk about the things I've learned, which has helped. I've also I've been involved with the Elephant Managers Association for now 17 years, just as either a board member or an executive committee member. And there are remarkable people in that organization that I connect with and that lift me up and I learn from. So I think that I appreciate what you said, and I'm very flattered that I don't even know what you said, the foremost Footcare dude.
Yes, that's the title.
Yeah.
That is the title of the episode now.
the FFCD, right? Because zoos love their acronyms. But it's really because people help me test things and try things out. And we're sitting here at, Seneca Park Zoo, and they're one of my longstanding partners, and we've learned a lot together. And their elephants are remarkable. The elephant manager here, Lindsay, is just incredible, and her team is always welcoming. So I appreciate that label or that perception that I'm that guy, but it's really all of us together doing it.
Sure. And I get that. But, again, my background is in the arts, and I know that some people just have a natural affinity for stuff. And once you have that, it grows, and you learn and you study and you learn from others and you collaborate and all the great things you said. But it was fascinating watching you work today, because you see things that other people weren't seeing until you pointed them out. And that's a special skill, and that's important for these elephants. And so that's a lot of, I think, what we're going to talk about today, just because, that's so specific.
Yeah.
And it's so important. So can you give an overview of why elephant foot care matters?
Yeah, for sure. What I have learned, I got involved with elephants, and I sort of bought into all the stuff that you read online and everything that we learn about elephants growing up on Disney and things like that. And I always focused on the really cool features of an elephant, the trunk, right? A giant tentacle with a ridiculous amount of muscle fascicles, the ears, the strength, the size. And in working with elephants, I've been working with elephants for a very long time, since 1998. And I learned really quickly that they are most vulnerable in their feet. And if you lose a foot on an elephant, for some reason, you lose an elephant, right? And I had a personal experience with an elephant that was very dear to me, and I thought I knew what the hell I was doing. And a foot condition that she had taught me very quickly that I did not know enough. And we eventually lost her to multiple issues, but the foot issue was sort of mine to hang my hat on, and I felt really terrible about that. So again, what I've learned in trying to follow up on that and make sure no one else has to go through what I went through, is that the feet are extremely uniquely adapted, and probably, in my opinion at this point, the most unique appendage on an elephant, and the thing that has the most vulnerabilities associated with it as well. Because I always say elephant feet are kind of like cheetahs. Cheetahs are so over-specialized that it makes them really, really delicate. Right? And that's how elephants' feet are. This structure has the ability to process sound through Pacinian corpuscles between the toes, right? It has an expansion-contraction ratio of anywhere from 12 to almost 20%. That's incredible. No other foot does that. Elephants also have straight rear legs, much like our own legs. They don't have the hock in the leg like even a rhino or a large giraffe would. There's just so many things about them that make no sense that I think are important for zoo professionals to learn more about and explore more about, which is why I've gotten into it.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, they're such. It's so fascinating to me to have been up close and to have touched an elephant's foot today, and to see the difference that the care that you give and that the keepers give. It's not just you. You're training people and showing them how to do this well, which is awesome and very important. But they're weird. Their feet are just weird. There's really, that's the scientific term, I think.
It applies.
Yeah. And obviously it makes sense. They are huge animals. Yeah. And those feet are doing a lot of work. Now, the problems that you find that are most common in elephants, you said can come from a variety of things, including even just how their feet shape and like point or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that affects how an elephant's foot will process force, which is their main function, is the elephant's conformation. What I mean by conformation is how are their legs oriented? How are the feet and the joints oriented? And in nature, you can be born with beautiful, perfect conformation, and your body will function optimally based on that, right? But nature throws curveballs at times, and you can also be born with deviations. So you could have a front right foot that is rotated outward, right? So the alignment of that foot is wrong, and it doesn't work perfectly the way that the system has evolved, right? So when you have that, that causes the animal to change how it bears weight, how it stands, right? And you see this in people. You're never going to not be able to do this now, but if you see a crowd of people standing around, just scan their feet and where they're bearing weight. You can tell, where their strong leg is. You can tell where they're putting most of the force and how they can stand still for longer based on how they distribute weight. In an animal, quadrupeds especially, and elephants, of course, when they have a deviation like that, they tend to overload some of the tissues in the foot that are not evolved to process that force, right? Or at least not to that same degree. So that's where you see a lot of the defects. Spoiler alert for everybody, right? There's this concept that elephants in the wild have perfect conformation and perfect feet and all of that. And that is absolutely a fallacy, right? I do a lot of conservation programs in the range countries, and I have friends who do research and have opportunities to anesthetize animals and put radio collars on or GPS collars on them, or just for other, tusk trimming or wound treatment kinds of purposes. And I started asking them to take pictures of the feet for me. And their response, being field researchers, was always, oh, there's nothing wrong with the feet. I said, well, yeah, okay, just send me some pictures anyway. And I have been able to find the exact same deviations in wild elephants that you see in the elephants that we manage in North America, and point them out to my friends who are doing that work. And the response is always, oh yeah, I've never really looked at the feet before. So it's there. It's a function of how animals are born and how they function in life.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. I always love the weirdnesses in my life that I can relate to the animal kingdom. Have always meant a lot to me. And especially when I was younger, but I don't walk with my feet straight. My right foot points out slightly to the right. And it actually makes me set up a drum kit slightly differently than most people. I angle it a little bit differently, which I think has helped me kind of with the unique sound that I have as a player. But also when I was younger, it made me walk slightly like more on the side of my foot. And I would get calluses on the back of my foot that I would have to like sand down. I've learned how to not do that. But I literally, like when you were talking about that today, I was like, oh, it's not just me. It's weird elephants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is kind of cool. And, you mentioned that you do a lot of stuff in the field, in the wild, and also with zoo-based programs. And one of the things that you talked about today, so we're here at Seneca Park Zoo, and like you said, not only were you doing and teaching elephant foot care, but you gave a presentation on work that you've done in Nepal. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how the zoo and the zoo elephants have helped the animals in Nepal. And so can you share that and share some of those stories? Because I think that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I've always, as a zoo professional, I've always sort of been concerned about is how do we connect the knowledge base that we have in North America or wherever your zoo occurs with what's going on in the range countries, right? And one of those projects is the Nepal work that you just mentioned. I was really fortunate to partner with the Katie Adamson Conservation Fund and Dave Johnson, who I understand you have interviewed for this podcast.
Yes, he's so cool.
Yeah, Dave is an amazing human. I've told him this recently, but it bears repeating. Dave is one of those people that you meet that are rare in life that you really come away knowing this guy is changing the world, right? And a lot of people want to do that, but to see someone who actually is doing it is pretty remarkable, and he's very humble about it. So I was very proud and excited to work with him and his partner, Ray Lucero, who also runs Katie Adamson Conservation Fund. Ray's Ray's kind of like my wife, the brains behind everything I do, right? So they're a really great pair. And through that partnership with them, I've been able to take the reins on this Nepal elephant health camp project that they have, which is an offshoot of work they've done in Nepal for, over 14 years. And it's just another project that's grown out of the really strong relationships they've built over there. So again, very flattered and fortunate to be able to be involved and also to have some opportunity to help steer it. We, as part of this project, take zoo professionals, and I'll work with my partner zoos who I work with now and recruit staff from them who are, people who are a good fit for this program, who are, well suited to travel internationally and have the skills that we need. And we'll go over there and then work with our partners in the community and the ones that are overseeing the care and well-being of the elephants in Nepal to execute a health camp for 2, almost 3 weeks every year. And we see all sorts of elephants. And I was really proud that this year, some of the officials who were responsible for the care of these elephants stood up and said that we have opened their eyes to different ways and brought new knowledge to them, and that they really appreciate what we're doing, which is the goal, right, for the elephants and for the people. So there's that project, which I love, and we're expanding on every year. In addition, one that I think is really important that I tested last year is that I work with Mike McClure, who runs the Tanzanian Elephant Foundation. Lamech started doing human-elephant conflict work, I think, in 2019. So his organization is relatively young. And he's done some remarkable stuff and takes a community-based approach. So he gets community buy-in. He uses capacity building in the community to help people do beehive fences and collect the honey and sell it, all the models that you've probably seen. But what he's really remarkable about is something similar to Dave. He's really good at connecting people. And Lamech did some collaring work for long-term monitoring of elephants so he can understand how these elephants are moving in the areas and in the communities that he works near. And I was lucky to go over and get some elephant foot data at the same time and just understand more about this guy. And so last year, I tested an idea that I've had for a while. I brought him to the States. And some of my partner zoos, including Seneca Park Zoo, were willing to let me bring him to them and put him in front of some of these elephants under human care. And this guy, who's been a field researcher, was able to put his hands on an awake elephant's feet, look into their mouths, check everything that he'd ever wanted to see up close on a cooperative elephant. And as we did it, I tied in a lot of the Footcare stuff and all the things that I've learned that you said that I have a knack for identifying and showing people. And at the end of that trip, I took Lamech and we went to Miami Zoo down in Florida and then Disney. And we were able to look at a lot of different elephants at those places. But he was able to see them and identify interesting traits in terms of conformation deviations. And then I tested him. I had him look at a young elephant and say, "Tell me what you see." And he saw that the deviations in the young elephant aligned with an older elephant and made the connection that it was her mother, right? And then we looked at a bull and he was able to pick out which one was her son. So at the end of it, I was really excited because suddenly now you've got a person doing research in the field and working on human-elephant conflict. And we as a zoo, because of what we were all able to do as a zoo community, we were able to give him insights and tools where he said, at the end of it, he said, I can go and look at elephants at a watering hole or something and identify who's related to who if they have similar deviations and be pretty close to accurate.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah.
So it was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so much of the work that you do out in the field, you get to practice and learn and refine by doing it at zoos, right? Yeah, right. That's really incredible. Yeah.
And the other one, too, that was a big deal for me is there's an elephant in Nepal that we saw last year who has a foot issue. I did not have the ability to help her in the way that I wanted when we saw her the first time. And she's had this foot issue for 20 years. And looking at her, I really wanted to bring some of what we've learned here to combat the same issues there, but there are some technical and logistic issues of getting some of that treatment over. And colleagues that I have now help me kind of rig up a similar system. And we've got her on treatments that are helping her now, and she's recovering, which is pretty cool for me. So
that is awesome.
Good alignments, right?
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that you talked about when it comes to this project is, so you go over once a year to Nepal, right? And you will spend an entire year, like part of your year, coming up with these treatment plans and thinking about these elephants and then seeing them year after year after year. What is that like?
It feels like an eternity between trips, right?
Sure.
To some degree, you're disconnected. I mean, they're 9.75 hours ahead of us, so even the time change is difficult. It makes it difficult to communicate. But it's nice to know we're going again, and we can keep going and contributing. But what I learned that was really encouraging is that our partners over there, they're listening, and we learned from them, learned a lot of techniques from them, and a lot about foot care challenges that are different there than they are here. But every year we've gone, we've seen improvements, we've seen changes, we see them adopt our techniques, we see them communicating with us differently, and vice versa. And we understand more about what we can give them to help them, and they work better with us. For instance, we were so much quicker this year. It's a streamlined system. We were able to work on 68 elephants this year. And the first year we did 43.
Right.
So we've really increased. Yeah. So it's interesting.
So I'm curious, is it a challenge for you going between zoos where, at least in AZA facilities, we are protected contact with elephants, and in Nepal, you just kind of have them lay down and do the thing, right? And we're not even sedating them from what I could see. It's just, which is insane. But is that like a different experience? And do you feel safer at zoos when you're in that situation? Do you feel, restrained yourself? Like it's harder to do things, or is it just different?
It's different. The common thread is what are your systems that are in place for effective management and for safety and for communication, right? So whether you're in a zoo in North America where you have restricted contact and you have barriers in place, right? You still have to have systems for how do we communicate about how we're going to interact with this animal? What are the physical constraints of this environment? Can I put my arm here? Or if he shifts the wrong way, do I get my arm pinned against a piece of metal? Right? So that's a risk and a concern. And our systems determine how safe we are in that. So in Nepal, when we go over there, yes, there are no barriers, right? And we are out in the open and they bring the elephants in. But again, we rely on our systems for safety. So our partners over there know the behavioral histories of the animals. They know the handlers, the guys who are training them on a daily basis and who know that elephant inside and out because they literally live with them 24/7. And we know what kinds of things we are going to be trying to ask the elephant to allow us to do, right? So we use our expertise from working in zoos and learning elephant behavior and learning safety and what the risks are. And then we apply that to the systems over there and come up with our own way of doing it. For instance, when I take a team over and let's say we have 4 elephants that are at the site when we arrive, those are the 4 elephants we're going to work on. My wife, Becky, who is a former elephant keeper and a really good communicator, and I think she's pretty sharp. I'm a little biased. But she will talk to our partners over there and say, give me the history. We identify all of that. She will then look at the animal and do photo documentation from a safe distance, and she will assess the nervousness of the animal, how the mahout interacts with the animal, and how the animal sort of observes her in the environment. And then she'll come back to me or one of my partners, like Brett Haskins from Roger Williams Park Zoo. Brett is my co-pilot on all this stuff. And she'll say, hey, here's what I got, here's what I saw. And then we'll pick our team based on that information. So for instance, this year we had Lindsay, who has a very strong background in elephants. And if we had an elephant that was a little nervous, or a mahout that might be a little bit less communicative, I would say, all right, Lindsay, I'm going to need you to read the elephant really carefully for your team. I want you on the front of the elephant, meaning the front feet, and then let your other 2 team members work on the rear feet and watch for X, Y, and Z, right? And then we have somebody who watches them the entire time too. So it's really interesting going from one system to another. But I'll be honest with you, man, you go from zoo to zoo and the systems are different.
Sure.
You know, and it just depends. So you're always having to be adaptable and figure it out. But it's really surreal in Nepal to stand up and look around sometimes, and you've got 4 elephants in different spaces in this big open field, and just people and goats, and there's a river full of crocodiles right there. I mean, it's bizarre, but we feel like we manage it really well and have a really high success rate with it.
Nice. That's really cool. Yeah, I know. I remember in the presentation, you called it controlled chaos, which is kind of what I call my thought processes most of the time. But
yeah, I agree. Me too, man.
Yeah, but that's awesome. Okay, so let's actually talk about elephant feet. I know we got into it very little bit at the beginning, but I want you to explain like what I saw today, basically, like to my audience, and why you do it, because it literally, to a complete like noob who does not know what's happening. And this is the second time I've seen you do this now, because we first met at Buttonwood Park Zoo when I was drumming with Emily and you were working on her feet. So go figure. Yeah. That was a fun day. Yeah. But it looks like you're just cutting her foot off, not like the bottom of her foot off. And I clearly know, obviously not, and you talked through it, but it is so insane. Y'all listening, you've got to picture this. There's just this big thing. It looks like a big nail file and a little knife thing. And from my eyes, you're just cutting foot off. And I know that's not the case, but it's a lot to see. So can you talk about what that is and why that matters?
For sure. So there's some interesting distinctions between what I do and what elephant teams do. Number one is that there is foot care, right? And I will teach people basics of foot care. That's anatomy, that's how the foot functions, that's, what are the important anatomical structures inside the foot that you want to be mindful of, that you are affecting by trimming on this foot. We will, like I said earlier, we'll look at conformation. We'll do a full assessment on that animal and determine how it uses its feet and how it loads those feet. And then based on that, we'll spend time reading the tissue. So we'll look at concavity in the face of a nail. We'll look at changes in cuticles. We'll look at defects that have developed in the nail faces, how the pads function. So we'll look at all of those things and we will map out a foot and develop a strategy for trimming it that helps that foot function better. I am not a big advocate for just hacking away on a foot and just cutting tissue off without a thought process, without a strategy. Number one, here's something scary you could think about. They have Pacinian corpuscles in their feet. Those Pacinian corpuscles are loosely responsible for transmitting sound, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Elephants hear through their feet is what we're saying. So imagine if I take a metal blade or a big nail file, like you said, and file on your ears and take tissue off. Am I changing how your eardrums function, how you hear things, how you pick up sound and transmit it? Almost certainly, right? So when I look at a foot, I try to impress upon people, this is not just a hoof or a nail, right? This is not just a structure that you're going to apply a broad general strategy to. You're going to have to look at, how do we do this for this particular animal? So that's the foot trimming piece. And when we do all of it, the easiest way to describe it is when we are cutting things off or rasping things down, we are simulating natural erosion. So we are sort of accelerating erosion in some spots to compensate for these differences. We are reshaping some of the tissue to help them process force better and have less direct impacts. That's kind of the foot trimming approach. What I do when I go to these facilities and work with these teams, I am doing a little bit more of foot building, right? So a subtle difference, but what I'm trying to do is help you over the long term reshape your elephant's foot to function best for that elephant. You just described to me how you walk a little bit differently, and it benefits you with your drumming, but also causes some changes in your foot, right?
Yep.
So what we would do is assess all of that, get that information, and then come up with a type of shoe that's going to work best for you, not trying to change you, but trying to enhance what you're doing and how you walk and how you function. That's what we do with the elephants. And I, with my experience with anatomy and different pathologies, and you learn more from your mistakes or from things going wrong than you do when they go right. So I've learned a lot from all this exposure to all these different elephants. So what I'll try to do is help with foot trimming, set up a basic care program that keeps a foot healthy and functional, and then we'll start looking at how do we steer these feet towards a better state of functionality, which in turn, in my opinion, and in terms of how anatomy functions, it affects everything from the foot up, right? So if you have better foot health and your foot processes force better, your ankle is better, your knee is better, your shoulders, how you move is better, how you sleep is better, right? So what we're trying to do is overall give these elephants a better set of shoes that function well for how they function in the world. Make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes almost too much sense. It's so simplistic sounding, but it's such a specific and unique thing at the same time.
Yeah. Can I tell you a secret?
No, please.
I never really cared too much about elephant feet. This isn't something like I would guess you might have grown up involved with music, right?
Yeah, always.
Dude, I never thought I'd work with elephants. I never was like, I got to work with elephants. And I fell into it because I was a bit of a jerk and the elephant team needed a jerk to fill a vacancy. So that's how I got the job. And it was really the fact that one elephant I was very connected to and learned so much from had an issue that kicked me hard in the gut. And I did not know how to solve it. And it impacted me tremendously. So I am known as the elephant foot person. I can't even say it. Right?
Yeah, no, you really struggle with this, which I get. Yeah.
It just feels weird. But I do recognize that I have that label attached to me. But everybody's like, when did you know you wanted to just be a specialist in elephant feet? And I'm like, never. And I do it because I can, but I really just want other people to learn how to do it and to not need me, which is the goal. I really enjoy more of the people part, which is, I'm still wrapping my head around that. It's interesting to me. I love working with people and teaching and seeing people be successful. So this is just one way that's manifested.
That's really cool. I love that. That is really funny though, especially because it's so specific and such a weird, specific thing to just be like, I'm not really passionate about this.
Yeah. I think, what it is? I think physics and just how things work has always, I cannot not see that stuff.
Right.
And elephant foot physics are really fascinating. And I do the same thing with the elephant emergencies and lifting and stuff. I work with the ASAR people, the Animal Search and Rescue Group, that works with zoos, training them to do all of this really nice emergency response and large animal lifting. They're an amazing group. But I talk to them, and they use me as an elephant specialist. And I'll tell them what I've done to lift an elephant that's been down. And they'll say things like, you used a par-buckling system to roll that elephant to its feet and properly apply. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. My brain just worked with that. And I can tell you how to do it and show you how to do it. But thank you for the definitions and the words that describe what it is I'm doing. So I think it's all the physics stuff. It's fascinating to me.
That is really cool. And it goes back to what I was saying, where again, I tie a lot of things into music because of course I do. But the Beatles couldn't read and write music, like literally, and they're my favorite act of all time. And, and some people, there's just that natural instinctual thing that leads you down the path. For me, I've been told by a lot of people, they think I'm an incredible interviewer, both fans and people who I talk to. I've never spent a minute of my life studying how to interview. The first time I ever interviewed anyone was my first interview for this podcast. Wow. I'm sure for reports and stuff, but like a true interview. And it just is a thing that it clicks for me, and I think finding that thing, whatever weird thing it is, is very important. And yeah, so I think that it's a very weird, cool specialty to be able to like look at an elephant and be like, oh yeah, you do this, you do that. But yeah, I've seen interviews with some of my favorite drummers where they're like, so you know, the interviewer's like, so you chose to play a 3/2 clave beat on this song. And the guy's like, is that what that's called? I just played what sounded good, man. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
It's really funny. But that's very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the people side of things, because you mentioned that you're very into that. And not only have I noticed that you're a very good teacher, but it was like being whispered while you were working with people today. The people that you were actively working with were talking about that. And then you were actually pulling keepers up to work on these feet and literally taking their hands and guiding them and showing them, but talking them through it and explaining things very well, I thought.
Thank you. And
so, I thought that was very cool. So if you could just, like, where did that come from, and what are the impacts that you've seen from that?
The answer is I don't know where that comes from. I have been told by people like yourself, right, that I'm a good communicator, as I sort of stumble with that explanation.
Me talk good.
Yeah, right. I don't like talking about what I do. It's weird to me. So it's a little uncomfortable sometimes. But in terms of those things, like I'm quiet generally. I listen a lot, and I see where people are, having challenges or where they're not quite connecting the concepts. And then what I do is I'll look at them and say, all right, here's how I relate to this. I don't know if I said it when you were there, but, I'll talk about an elephant's foot, and I can talk about the expansion contraction rate, right? People get that. They hear that. That's technical. But then I'll say, all right, so think about it like this. An elephant's foot is a giant wad of pizza dough, right? And most people then go, oh, okay, I can visualize that now. And then I say, all right, your nails are like rocks that are stuck in that pizza dough, right? So when the nail moves, the impacts aren't on the nail. It's on the pizza dough, right? And then people suddenly are like, oh, I get that. So that's kind of the piece that I always enjoy doing. Like, where's that connection point? How do I come up with that ability to give you a concept that is outside of what we're talking about, that helps you then connect things that you aren't seeing on your own? And I love that piece, which I think translates to being a teacher, and so with what you were talking about, right, with guiding people through it, I love putting tools in their hands and creating a safe space where they can make some mistakes, but not ones that are going to be, irreversible, and just letting them go, and then showing them where are next steps. Now, what do you see? How does that feel? Now you're using the tool differently. Do you feel how the teeth cut if you slide it instead of drag it, right? And you just see people grow and sort of take it by the reins and just run with it, right? And when you get to that moment, I'm like, done. That's great.
Right.
And I really do. I don't want to be the only one doing this stuff, because what happens when I'm gone?
Right.
The elephants need it. The people need it. And it goes back to the conservation programs too. Taking someone like Lindsay, who's dedicated her life to these animals here at this zoo and to the community here in North America, and saying, all right, you got skills, lady. You're also a great team member, right? That chemistry is important. Building teams is really tough.
Yes.
And pulling her all the way across the world to the other side of the planet and saying, all right, put your skills to use. And she proved to herself that she knows what the hell she's doing, right? And seeing that and seeing the joy that she had, I'm just like, that's fantastic. That's the best for me. And then I can go away and do something else, focus on another thing.
Yeah, since you don't care about elephant feet at all.
Yeah, who cares?
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. My favorite part of watching the elephant foot procedure today was, so like I said, you opened it up to various keepers, and it's not just the keepers from here, but also Rosamond Gifford Zoo from Syracuse came for this, and you had that team working, and the first keeper that went up was a little timid at first, and then really started to get it. And then the other keepers went up, and then you had enough time for one person to repeat, and the first person went up again. Yeah. And she got it. And she just like dug in.
Yeah.
And then as you were showing more advanced stuff and literally like moving her hands and stuff, she was getting it and she was doing the thing. And that was when you called me up so that I could feel the difference and stuff. And I did. And she was so proud. And she was like, I don't know if you heard, but when I was like, wow, that's really cool. You're doing a great job. And she just went, okay, I do think I got this. Like she needed that in that moment, I think. And it was so cool to just watch that confidence grow. Yeah. And I was like, you're already such a cool person because you're an elephant keeper and you do the thing. But, that was awesome. I liked that so much.
Connections, man. Yeah. Making connections and feeling like you have some controls to make things better. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love seeing people get it. Yeah, that was fun for me. And I mean, I did that very deliberately too, because those keepers work with Asian elephants, mm-hmm. right?
Yep.
And here are 3 African elephants that are really well trained that you can now play with their feet a little bit and test some new tools and test some of these concepts we talked about all day and find out, yes, my skills transfer. I'm not just an Asian elephant keeper, right, or expert. I can do this with other animals, right? And that's the same thing I was saying about pulling Lindsay all the way to the other side mm-hmm. of the world, right? You can do that. And she works with African elephants, and she just had access to 68 Asian elephants for 2 weeks.
Makes me wonder if I could drum with an African elephant.
Right. I got a few of them I could point you towards, for sure.
But I do think everything that you do is very impressive. And I know that the day that we met, Buttonwood was like awesome, but it was a whirlwind. But even then, I didn't know how Asian elephant tongues worked. And you literally were like, come here, man. Look, I don't even think you knew who I was. And you're just like, here, this is an Asian elephant's tongue. Reach in there, feel like, here's how this works. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening right now? And that part of that made that episode with Emily. And I was just like, this is so cool. It's very neat. You can tell how passionate you are about teaching with all of it.
Yeah. It's connections, right? And I mean, you said you were going to ask at the end of the podcast, what's one of my moments, right, that I like to tell. I'm going to skip ahead and tell you. I have a hard time with this one, but I'm going to tell it. The elephant that I was connected to, she passed, right? And we were flooded with sympathy notes, emails, cards, flowers. It blew me away. The mayor of Baltimore sent a plaque commemorating her life, right? So this elephant had a huge impact on people, everyone who had seen her. It wasn't just me, right? And I was blown away by that connection. But the moment that I'm going to tell you about is I got one card, and it was addressed to me at the zoo, and I opened it, and it was from one guy in California. And all it had was, sympathies, but it said, I was in Baltimore for business, and I stopped by the zoo, and you were out next to the yard with Dolly. And you took 5 minutes to show me her tongue and her mouth and her ears and just talk about how amazing she was. And she just stayed with you the whole time, and your connection to her was obvious, and she was so calm. And he said, it was 5 minutes, and I'll never forget that moment. And he said, you changed how I view elephants and how I view zoos by sharing her with me. And he said, and I cannot imagine the grief you must be experiencing for losing her. And in that one moment, I was like, this is what zoos do. It's connections. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, I've just been like, that's what we're here for. If I hit one person today and make one connection, and I see one guy that's on my side of the fence and is engaged with elephants, and the look on your face that day, you were just like, this is the most amazing thing ever. And I'm like, we can do better, right? That's an opportunity for us that we have to take. And you remember it now. It'll stick with you. Mm-hmm. And that is how we save these animals, right? That's how we make sure that people care about these animals in Africa and Nepal and in South America, whatever the species. Mm-hmm. By using this wonderful opportunity we have in zoos to say, hey, let me give you one connection. And if you do that once every couple months with somebody, it's a win. It's a huge win.
Oh, and you never know what it's going to do. Like I said this, I was recently on the NEI Tech Talks podcast, and I said this, and I was so nervous to say it because I haven't figured out a way. I've workshopped it since I said it, and I can't figure out a way to say it where it doesn't sound egotistical. but it's not meant to be. It's just the opposite, actually. But I am why zoos exist. And I don't mean for John Rossi, although I wish they did. But but I started off loving animals.
Yeah.
And so as a kid, I went to zoos and aquariums. And I went to some great places, some crap places, because I didn't know the difference. Then when I started touring and going to more places, I learned about accreditation. And I started talking to keepers at good zoos. And that's why I make this podcast. I fell in love with these people and their animals.
Yeah.
And I always say, you know, my mission statement for Rossifari is connecting people to animals through their people. And that's what did it for me. I would talk to these people and I would just be blown away. And any good that has ever come from this podcast, any of the conservation legacy that we have, any one person that has been touched by one episode of it came from those keepers talking to some dude who was at their zoo one day, going through on tour, probably, you know, asked way too many questions about their red pandas, but they took the time to pause and to talk to me. And any good that I've done in this world in the last 5 years and will continue to came from those people making that step. And not one of them knows it, because even those people who were talking to me initially, they don't know, they don't remember me. They don't, even if they're a fan of the podcast, they don't know that it was them that I talked to that led to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's just incredible.
Dude, that doesn't sound egotistical at all. And I've been on the other side of that. I've had people like the guy that wrote me the letter come back and say, you did this, you gave me this opportunity, and I really want to be involved and understand these animals more, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for.
Yeah,
That's the win right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We have been rambling for a bit now, and I love it. And I could talk to you all day, but we have to go to dinner. It's very important. We have plans.
Starving. I'm working all day, man.
So let's. Is there a conservation organization that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Absolutely. I have to give a shout out to my partners at Katie Adamson Conservation Fund. Again, Dave's changing the world, but I have to say it is the conservation program that I feel the strongest connection to and I feel the best about, because these projects, Dave has zero ownership, or he doesn't prevent other people from being involved. If you want to get involved, he will help you find a way. And that's amazing, right? Like, imagine setting up and running an elephant health camp in Nepal, right? And being able to take somebody that didn't do the 14 years of legwork and say, hey, man, you want to run this thing and get involved? Who would say no? Right. And Dave just gives freely of those opportunities because he really recognizes some of what you and I have been talking about, which is it takes more people. You've got to get everyone involved. You've got to get connections everywhere. And because of that, he's changing lots of species, lots of the futures for many species, but he's also just changing keeper lives and people who just want to be involved in a conservation program but aren't necessarily even in a zoo. So it's pretty incredible. And KACF is hands down one of the most magical conservation organizations I've ever seen. I would also have to say, too, though, that the Elephant Managers Association is the professional organization that I feel strongest about. That organization is strictly for elephant care professionals, veterinarians, researchers, enthusiasts. And the amount of connections that I have made just through being involved and going to the annual conferences and just getting on the board and doing things. Lindsay said it in our presentation earlier. She and I have known each other probably for, 20 years. And look at where we ended up. We ended up in Nepal with, I think, 6 other EMA members with us, just by coincidence, right? We're all involved. So that's a fantastic organization that people should check out and get involved with as well.
And listeners, you'll be hearing more from them next week, actually, as we're doing a couple weeks of elephant stuff. And so Trip Gorman's going to be on to talk about that, the president of the organization. So I'm looking forward to that. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
Oh, something gross.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm going to give you a real poop story.
Poop story.
I was training someone one time on how to sanitize and clean the black bear enclosures at the zoo I used to work at. Very enthusiastic young lady, and her pitching arm with a shovel full of bear poop to put it into the trash can was a little bit too strong, and she spiked a giant plop of nasty bear poop. And I was trying to tell her to slow down, and my mouth was wide open, and I caught some of it and got a good taste for black bear poop.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's bad stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and for just everything today. This has been awesome.
Oh, no. Thank you very much for the interest and for coming and putting the effort in. It's been great to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Definitely.
Seriously, I just get to talk to and interact with some of the most amazing and inspirational people. And I just loved that. I hope you did as well. Mike McClure, just a really, like I said, he's the foremost Footcare dude, right? And that's all that matters. So I'm just so glad knowing that there is a person like that out there for the elephants, even if they're not his, primary passion. Just astonishing stuff. But I hope y'all enjoyed that very much. And we've got some more elephant stuff coming up for you here. So this was not a one-off. You're going to hear some more elephant content very soon. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with y'all. Before I say goodbye, I do want to take a moment to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Kevin Williams, and the still anonymous just here for the stickers. Grrr. Actually, I kind of love it. But yeah, so thank y'all so very much for being here. And we'll be back on Friday with Zoo News. But until then, don't forget, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.